Hello and welcome to Butter Movies. Lioness Season 2, Episode 7 feels exactly like Season 2, Episode 3, Along Came a Spider. Both of them exist largely to set up the next part of the story. Episode 3 was about the training of Captain Josie Carrillo, and Episode 7 is about tying up loose ends so the different story pieces can be consolidated into one last stand. But both episodes suffer because they don't stand on their own. Aside from learning Joe's fate, which is no real surprise, and a couple of plot details, audiences don't take away anything that important from what happens here. Even knowing that the biggest question is whether or not Joe survived, Taylor Sheridan opens Episode 7 with a lengthy conversation between Byron Westfield and Secretary Edwin Mullins, which is actually Morgan Freeman delivering two different monologues. One is a criticism of the state of modern journalism, and the other is a discussion about 9/11 and a lack of modern leadership. This all feels like Sheridan getting up on his soapbox for a few minutes, and it's not the most exciting way to launch viewers back into the story. It's not until after the credits that fans see Joe alive and kicking, quite literally. And that sets the tone for the rest of the episode. Things happen that clean up the narrative. DEA agent Raymond Gutierrez is interrogated, cleared, and potentially never seen again, while his informant Atsi is questioned and likewise moved out of the way. Almost all of the supporting characters are brought to one location so that they can all be in one place when the inevitable call comes. There's a briefing scene with Byron, Joe, and Caitlin Meade so that the audience can understand the operational details and stakes. Yet none of this pops off the screen. The most exciting parts are the arguments that happen between Joe and her husband Neil over her returning to work, and largely because of the acting of Zoe Saldana and Dave Annable. There's something hypocritical about Joe saying Neil can't guilt her into quitting when she's guilted other people all season. The sunk cost of these special ops. It's enough to leave a pit in your stomach as the Lioness crew boards the plane to Iran. "This one's going to be spicy," Joe says, egging on her comrade's bloodlust before making a devastating last phone call to Neil. The final stretch of this mission couldn't be further from where it started, and the chances of finding any redemption in it are next to nil, even if they do win. Doesn't bode well for the future of Joe's family, nor for any spy aiming for order as the solution to all this chaos. Wouldn't you know it, the deck's been reshuffled to suit the skills of our Lioness. Their best covert option of illuminating the targets in Iran is by sending in a helicopter to strike close by, and Joe has the clearance to run the operation from the field. Byron isn't sure about letting Joe go to Iran, even if she promises not to set foot off the base, but he's swayed just enough when she lays out her real reason for being there. "I can't walk away on a loss." There are just 2 episodes left this season, including this one, and we are no closer to reaching that goal than we were nearly 2 months ago. Sadly, Lioness Season 2 is only more confusing this week. As Secretary of State Morgan Freeman continues to investigate the suicide bombing at the border, CIA Deputy Director Byron Westfield, Michael Kelly, explains that he believes Iranian counterintelligence is working through a proxy, at the behest of Chinese intelligence. What? According to Westfield, their plan is to destabilize the border and influence the US elections. Plus, the CIA received information from Jordan and Mossad that 2 Chinese nuclear scientists are stationed in Hakkari, Turkey, with plans to travel to Taiwan within the week. The new threat is World War III. So after a weird speech about how George W. Bush shepherded us into the future post-9/11, it's time for Freeman and Westfield to mobilize. "We're not the only country with open borders," Freeman says. "Maybe it's time we reminded our adversaries of that." Cruz and Josie reach the new safe house in Fort Liberty before the rest of the team, just in time to respond to the inquiry. These two wanna fuck. Pablo Carrillo is safely in prison and headed to San Jose. The door has officially been opened on that front, even though they don't actually get to finish this episode. Given the seriousness and personal harm of the previous Lioness operation's love complications, you would think Cruz would have been able to hold her own for another one. However, spies frequently seek out opportunities for emotional and physical contact, frequently with other spies who are equally adept at separating their emotions to match the pandemonium. Meanwhile, the role of lone gunman touching down for moments of quiet between storms has never been less on the table for Joe. Her marriage is strong and her family life is happy, and she'd just found a replacement field operative in Cruz. But the suicide bomb at the border has only strengthened her resolve to play against the devil's aces as fast as they come. "I'm hunting how to make peace with walking away," she tells Neil in the hospital, having just been told her torn artery will prove lethal if it tears again. "But I have to find it, and you can't fucking guilt me, you can't reason me, and you can't love me into doing it." That last part is surely what stings most for Neil, who's just told his wife he won't survive it if she dies on the job. Apropos of her work-life priorities, she's even more straight with Byron later on when they're discussing the next phase of the mission, to show Iran and China that we aren't the only nation with an open border, as directed by Mullins. And they're going to do that by intercepting the 2 Chinese nuclear scientists at an Iranian airbase. The Empire will strike back. Wouldn't you know it, the deck's been reshuffled to suit the skills of our Lioness. Their best covert option of illuminating the targets in Iran is by sending in a helicopter to strike close by, and Joe has the clearance to run the operation from the field. Byron isn't sure about letting Joe go to Iran, even if she promises not to set foot off the base, but he's swayed just enough when she lays out her real reason for being there. Good news, folks. Joe's still with us. And then some. Just when it seemed our girl was staring down a permanent sunset, she's alive and literally kicking the shit out of hospital staff in a blind rage. Turns out the shrapnel in her side was a piece of her cell phone, lacerating an artery that could take her out again real quick if she doesn't take it easy for at least the next week. All I'll say is that the devil's showing faces, the doctor tells her. Think it through before you play your hand. Love when Sheridan gets a little cowboy Lou. Episode 6, 2381 is the episode that brings the Paramount Plus show to a tipping point. It's the one that throws all the cards on the table, including another potential cast change. However, it's also the episode that most highlights the pacing issue that Season 2 has dealt with from the start. Is almost entirely focused on cleaning up the damage after the cliffhanger that ended Lioness Season 2, Episode 5, Shatter the Moon. People count their losses, yell at one another over who's responsible, and decide what to do next. There's a big reveal about DEA agent Gutierrez that keeps the tension level high, but mostly this episode feels like clearing the deck so that the series can do something with the last 2 installments of the season. The return of Cruz Manuelos has proven to be the best part of Lioness. Since her reappearance in Season 2, Episode 4, 500 Children, Cruz has been at the center of some of the most memorable scenes and helped to push the story arc forward in new and interesting ways. She's challenged Joe and been instrumental in helping her replacement Josie Carrillo. In Episode 6, Cruz intervenes when Josie's father Pablo Carrillo assaults her after learning why Josie is at his home. Her sweeping in and holding Pablo at gunpoint is a memorable moment not just for her, but in that it's the kicker of a sequence in which the whole team takes over the place. This very violent turn of events includes killing Pablo's security team and finding out that his maid Atsi is wearing a wire. Under pressure from 2 cups, Atsi reveals that she's working for Gutierrez. This is a not entirely unexpected plot twist that gives everyone something else to do. It does, however, stall the Carrillo storyline in its tracks. Episode 6 ends with Pablo and Josie just staring at one another from across a room. The whole momentum in this part of the story comes from Cruz taking charge, whether it's physically or giving Josie important advice. It's enough to make audiences wonder why Season 2 didn't just come up with some reason to keep Cruz as its Lioness. The character may not have wanted to come back into the program, but she's certainly proving her value over again. And the same goes for actor Laisla de Oliveira, who slid right back in as if she never left. Josie makes contact with her family, or not her uncle, but her mother and father. It's the part audiences have been thinking about since the Lioness Season 2 premiere, and the reason it works is Cruz being there. Her calming Josie down before they arrive and her reactions to what gets said at the dinner table are memorable moments that also remind audiences that it isn't easy or even fun to be a Lioness. From the season premiere, the character of Jo has been incredibly aggressive in knowing what she wants and expecting to get it, without much care for anyone else's situation or their feelings. The scenes involving Jo's children and her husband Neil have been the only ones to prove that Jo is capable of warmth and compassion. In Season 2, Episode 5, that changes because Jo is one of the people most affected by seeing the endangered children. Zoe Saldana has a great scene in which Jo, struggling with a few tears, calls back to CIA headquarters and argues that they should be allowed to rescue the kids. This prompts a brief, but intense argument with her boss. It's really nice to see the vulnerable side of Jo make its way into the military side of Lioness Season 2's narrative, because it gives Saldana more to do than yell at people and dish out orders, although she does her biggest amount of yelling at the beginning of the episode when Jo is enraged about what's just happened. But from a character standpoint, it makes her far more interesting. There have been times where she's been frustrating to watch, particularly in the premiere and in Season 2, Episode 3, Along Came a Spider. This is a show who has more to offer plot-wise. Jo's scenes with Cruz are especially fun because the two interact with one another as colleagues, no longer in a boss-employee relationship. It's Cruz who comes up with the idea of offering Josie's father a deal and gets Zoe on board with doing so, although based on Josie's reaction to the slurs he utters during his dinner table monologue, she may no longer think her father is worth saving. But that's Cruz's idea, and she has some good advice for both Josie and Jo. And Jo's willingness to listen to her is